Why the disbelief? Why do people refuse to believe that there is a depopulation program? This is a question that all awakened individuals are wrestling with. People's refusal to accept this reality is by far the greatest frustration and the greatest impediment to change. What is worse is that most people even refuse to consider the possibility that such a program exists and become irrationally angry if pressed to consider this possibility. Countless friendships have fallen apart, and countless families have come apart because this split between the awakened and the oblivious appears to be unbridgeable. Never mind pushback from governments and international organizations and multinational corporations involved in the depopulation genocide. This is an insignificant obstacle to the dissemination of this truth compared to the irrational and aggressive refusal of the common man and woman to accept it or to even consider it. It is almost as though a diabolical force keeps mankind imprisoned in ignorance and apathy, a force so mighty that has rendered most men and women on this planet prisoners of evil, a force so dark that it has rendered the vast majority blind, deaf, and mute. This split is so deep and wide that we can almost speak of a split in the human species, the awakened and the oblivious, the enlightened and the blind, the chosen and the damned. It is as though mankind has been divided, has been cut with a knife, and there is no way to unite it again. One part belongs to God, truth, and the future, and the other belongs to Satan, untruth, and the past. One part is complete, and the other lobotomized. One part is free, and the other zombified. One part is pure, and the other sullied. Those who refuse to confront the truth suffer from an infirmity of the spirit and an emptiness of the soul. We must accept that this is fundamentally a spiritual battle, a battle between good and evil. And evil definitely has the upper hand. In fact, evil has the world firmly in its grip. Luckily, some of us have freed ourselves from evil's grip. We are the enlightened, the Illuminati, in the new sense of the word and not in the old sense, with its old meaning, which is a perversion committed by the unenlightened, by the imprisoned, who refuse to leave the darkness and walk into the light, who refuse, in other words, knowledge and choose instead ignorance. Yes, this is a battle of good and evil, and this is evil's last stand on this earth. But why? How can this be? This is a question, a lament, an exasperation that I hear over and over again. Enlightened people from across the world cry to me for help, cry to comprehend, cry to break the spell that keeps their friends and families trapped in ignorance and indifference, trapped in darkness. Is there a rational answer to this question, to this mystery? If there is, it is this. Most people are not capable of separating the wheat from the chaff, so when they hear about the depopulation program, they treat it like any other insignificant piece of information that comes their way on any given day and simply ignore it. Lack of discernment, therefore, is the first impediment to the dissemination of this knowledge. Those who can discern that the Depop program might be important intuitively sense that it is a dangerous subject, and fear sets in, and they simply turn away from it as one would walk away from a fire, lest they get burned. Fear, therefore, is the second impediment to the dissemination of this knowledge. Those who transcend their fear or apprehension because they are brave or curious or both, want to find out more, want to understand before they decide one way or another. As they begin looking for confirmation, the vast majority get stuck in the complexity and vastness of this subject and give up before they get to form an opinion. Lack of intelligence, therefore, is the third impediment to the dissemination of this knowledge. Population control is a big and difficult subject to understand because it is the most multidisciplinary. It encompasses virtually every field of human knowledge, from religion to politics, from history to chemistry, from demography to statistics, from medicine to military strategy, and from philosophy to philosophy, because everything begins and ends with philosophy. It takes a steep learning curve to understand it even vaguely, and most people are simply not smart enough to succeed, so most don't even try. At this point, we have lost at least half of mankind to lack of discernment, fear, and plain old stupidity. This half will never get it. They are simply not equipped to understand such a difficult subject. It is like Chinese to them, or quantum physics. From here on, it gets interesting. For once, the terrible facts start to pile up, and people who are inquisitive and intelligent enough to want to understand are hit by the horror, scale, and scope of Depop. And they recoil from this knowledge the same way human beings recoil from death. People then try to deal with it the way we all deal with the death of a loved one. Some seek refuge in denial, some in derision, some in cynicism, some still in alternative explanations that are emotionally easy to grasp and accept. So they say, for instance, that the poisons found in our food are there because of the profit motive, and will insist upon this alternative explanation because it is an easy front to hide their emotional frailty behind. It doesn't matter how many ironclad arguments they hear and how much evidence they see that disprove their profit motive hypothesis. They will not budge because they found a comfortable place to hide their emotional weakness. Half of the people who are sufficiently intelligent to understand the basics of depopulation are not sufficiently strong emotionally to accept this brutal truth. They simply lack the psychological strength to deal with such a brutal reality. They are too weak for this burden. So they discard this unwanted knowledge to protect themselves emotionally and psychologically. Those who manage to accept this brutal reality but find themselves unable to cope with the emotional burden this knowledge places on them desperately look for an escape, for a cop-out, anything that can unburden them of this horrid knowledge. To find an easy escape, most seek validation from family and friends who have no clue about this subject and are therefore in no position to say anything of value, but who will immediately discount it because it sounds too strange to believe, so it is far easier to disbelieve. This kind of person chooses ignorance as their cop-out because ignorance is bliss, whereas knowledge of this nature is unbearable. Others will find an escape by reasoning to themselves that there is nothing they can do about it because they're just too small and powerless to affect a program of global proportions. So they resign themselves behind their political impotence. This kind of person chooses impotence, their insignificance as their cop-out, because to be small and to stay small is safe and is easy, whereas to wield this knowledge imposes heavy responsibilities. And others still find an escape in God, so they abandon themselves in God's hands. In other words, they hide behind religion or spirituality. saying to themselves that God will take care of this, that God takes care of everything, that this is God's domain, not man's. This kind of person chooses faith in God as their cop-out because it is comforting to believe that God will take care of everything. And others still find an escape in authority, reasoning to themselves that those in power must know what they're doing since they have all the facts and are elected leaders who could not commit the genocide because democracy has checks and balances that would prevent such a thing. This kind of person chooses faith in authority as their cop-out because it is comforting to believe that those in power can look out for everyone. The need to believe in something comforting is stronger than the desire for truth, especially if the truth is disquieting. The need to hang on to their old and pleasant worldview is far easier than having to confront a new and frightening worldview. By now, we lost 3/4 of mankind to lack of discernment, fear, stupidity, and emotional weakness with all its cop-outs, ignorance, impotence, faith in God, and faith in authority. But what happens to the quarter, to the 25% of people who make it over these awesome obstacles because they are sufficiently intelligent to understand and sufficiently strong to cope? The vast majority of these will be stopped by the mightiest of all obstacles: self-interest and social conditioning. Those who have careers to protect, wealth to increase, and political interests to advance will either say nothing about this or will milk this knowledge for all it's worth, and will use it to position themselves a rung or two higher on the social scale by taking advantage of this knowledge. They will abandon their consciences and the rest of mankind, including their own children, for personal gain. They choose to sell themselves for profit because they are self-serving. And those who don't like to stick out because they have no leadership material in them and are content with their lives as they are, will keep their heads low and their tails between their legs because they were taught and conditioned to know their place. So, they will abandon their consciences and the rest of mankind, including their own children, just to fit in. They will choose to sell themselves for social acceptance because they are conventional. By now, we have lost 99% of mankind. That is why the depopulation genocide has remained secret for 7 decades as an international system, and for 1,000 years as the holy grail of all organized religions. And why those who are awakened walk through the valley of the shadow of death alone and fear no evil, but know they are surrounded by evil.